about conscious leadership. I think I'd like to just start off with maybe there's a couple new faces on today, so I just wanted to go around and if we could just introduce yourself and maybe share what your favorite Christmas movie is, because we did your favorite Christmas song a few weeks back. So Becca, I'll start with you. I think you're muted. Okay, sounds good. Christina, I think you just joined, but we are just going around introducing who you are and what your favorite Christmas movie is to start off.
I'm back now, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry. I am Becca. Nice to meet you. I work for Arup, who are a global engineering firm in their global learning team. And my favourite Christmas film, probably Love Actually.
Very nice. I don't think I've seen that one. I'll add it to my list. I should start taking notes. I can
not
add all these Christmas lists. Thanks, Becca. Christina, I'm not sure if you heard me earlier, but we're just introducing who we are and your favorite Christmas film.
Hi, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes. No worries.
Hi, I'm actually from Greece, and I don't even remember how I joined this group, but I'm working as a life coach in many of the subjects. I'm working with my clients. It's how they can have their career development. So HR is a big part of that. And I think that's what I would like to know about career development and personal development through that.
Great. Thanks, Christina. And what's your favorite Christmas film?
My favorite, sorry, Christmas
film.
Oh, wow. Oh, I think Home Alone. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's. I think
that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christina, and welcome to Happiness in Humans.
Thank you. Thank you.
Claire, you're up next.
I'm Claire, and I'm head of talent for Sagittarius Digital Marketing. We're a digital marketing agency with offices in Ashford, London, Leeds, the Ukraine, and we're just acquiring a business in Jordan as well, which is interesting. And my favourite Christmas film, do you know what? It's tricky actually, because I do, as you can see, I do rather love Christmas. And I only found Elf a few years ago. So
really?
I quite like that still. I know everybody goes, oh, not Elf. And the other thing I saw at the cinema last year, my friend took me to, was a new Christmas film called Last Christmas. It's got all the songs from Wham, obviously, Last Christmas. And
that's my favorite Christmas song.
Yeah, it's a proper little sweet Christmas movie, and it will become a classic. But it has got a very sad twist just before the end. But I won't spoil that because I expect it will be on Netflix or something this year.
I'll keep an eye out for it. Thanks, Claire. Emma, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Rose. I work in the culture and engagement space. I'm currently freelancing. And my favourite Christmas movie is purely related to music, is The Snowman, because I cannot get enough of Walking in the Air and all of the other songs on that. So yeah, that's mine.
Amazing. Thanks, Emma. Gifty, you're up next. Had quite a few more people join recently. Not sure if she heard me. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Rosie. Can you hear me? Hi, everyone.
I can. Yep. Hi.
Hi. So, favourite Christmas movie has got to be Mary Poppins.
Ah, I've never thought of that as a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I've watched that since I was a child. And I've lost count how many times I've watched that. But yeah, I just love that. Yeah.
That's a great movie. All right, thanks, Gifty. Jade, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Jade, and I've recently started at the Happiness Index on the secondment. So this is week 2. And my favourite Christmas film, so controversially, I'm not really a film lover. So this Love Actually is not only my favourite Christmas film, but one of my favourite films ever. So Love Actually for me as well.
Great. That's the second one, so I definitely have to check that one out.
Definitely
Jenny.
should, definitely.
I will. Jenny, I think you came in late, but we're just introducing ourselves and your favorite Christmas film, if you're able to talk at the moment.
Hello, sorry, I've got about a million things going on today and I have problems logging in. But anyway, thank you. Hello, everybody. Jen Workman. Favourite Christmas movie? I'm going to go. I saw somebody pull it up as like a retro poster the other day. Trading Places. I love that film.
Okay, another new one for me.
It's partly because it's very funny. It's got Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy in, but there's a bit of a moral in there as well. So yeah, it's a good one.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. Julian, you're up next.
Sorry, taking myself off mute. Julian from Hum Not Drum, a strategic consultancy and content creation agency for people engagement. I'm currently planning quite a few Christmas parties for my clients. So yeah, it's a good theme. In terms of favourite Christmas movies, I think not Christmas themed, but Star Wars for me. Definitely showing my age, but Star Wars watched on a 10-inch black and white telly upstairs in the mid-80s, eating cold turkey sandwiches. Either that or Die Hard, which actually is a Christmas movie.
Thanks, Julian. Die Hard and Star Wars. That's a good combo. Margarita, you're up next. She might be on mute. Oh, there you are.
Hi, hello, hi. Margarita, Chief Happy Fire. I work with organizations and with individual people to improve basically their life. I'm brought up in Germany, so this one film I remember quite well. It's actually a fairy tale, a Bruder Grimm one, which is called Aschenbrödel, and there is a Czech version which is very cute, which I remember always watching every year. Yeah.
Oh, very interesting, Margarita. Should share the link in the group chat if you can. I'd like to hear more about it. Maria, you're up next. And you're eating your lunch, so if you want to skip past you.
I've just finished. Yeah, I'm gonna chuck another one in for the Love Actually. It's very good, so please do watch it. But the other one is The Holiday, and I know it's really like me, but it's quite nice, and I do watch that every year. So there you go.
Very nice. Thanks, Maria. Mark, you're up next.
Hi everybody, good to see some familiar faces. I'm Mark from the Happiness Index. My favourite film is Home Alone, so that's taken, so I will go Home Alone 2. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Max, you're up next.
Hi everyone, so I'm Max, and similar to Jade, I joined the Happiness Index recently, became part of the growth team. And I would say, I'd join Claire on this one and probably say that Elf is also my favourite Christmas film.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. And welcome to your first Happiness in Humans. Narissa, you're up next.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm Narissa. I work at Westminster City Council as a Wellbeing and Rewards Specialist. I'm gutted that my name doesn't come higher up the alphabet because Julian pipped me to the post there. Die Hard is my all-time favourite Christmas movie. 1 and 2. The whole franchise is my favourite movies, all over anyway. And anyone who says it's not a Christmas movie, 1 and 2, they're committing blasphemy. Because it is. It's totally a Christmas movie.
Thanks,
welcome to the party, pal.
Awesome. Thanks, Narissa. Philip, you're up next.
Yeah, hi, I'm Philip. I'm new to the Happiness Index, so just hopefully find out a little bit more about it today. Well, any movie, any long classic movie, Spartacus, any of those things over Christmas. But I suppose one with a sort of fairly tenuous Christmas link is when Harry Met Sally. Not Christmas, but it's got a New Year's happy ending. Yeah, and it's also just always makes this film that makes me just makes me laugh, I guess.
That's a good one. Thanks, Phil, and welcome to Happiness and Humans.
Okay.
Silke, you are next.
Hi, I'm also towards the end of the alphabet, so mine have been taken. So I'll go with the traditional one, Scrooge. I don't think anybody's mentioned that because I think it's quite amusing to have Scrooge actually moan about Christmas. And I can also relate to the one that Margarita mentioned. They're the old traditional German films. They're quite, they're very traditional basically. So the traditional Christmas movies of fairy tales that are on in Germany quite a lot over Christmas. So they're really nice when I'm back home, which unfortunately is happening this year. And,
all right, thank you, Silke. And okay, I'm just going to go on to Natasha now. Your favorite film, and if you could introduce yourself as our guest star today.
Oh yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Natasha. I run Conscious Works. So it's a coaching and consulting company. It specializes in organizational well-being. My career has been in HR, and my favorite Christmas film, like, has already been bagged. So when I'm with my partner, it's Love Actually, and when I'm with the kids, it's Elf.
Elf is my favorite.
Yeah, it's
that's
such
a good one.
Film.
I think I've seen it a million times, and I still love watching it every year.
Yeah, classic.
It is. All right. Well, thanks everyone for sharing your Christmas films. I've got a good list for myself, so it's kind of a selfish question in the end. Looking for inspiration to watch Christmas films this year. So Natasha, if you could just start off and kick us off with just introducing us to what is Project Brightspots, and how did that research come about?
Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks Rosie for having me here today to talk about this. So this is the first time we're talking about the research that we've been doing this year. So basically, I was at the Mad World conference last year. I don't know if anybody's ever been to it. It's a well-being conference, predominantly for HR people. And I was listening to the speakers and listening to them talking about sort of the failing state of the workplace and how stressed out everybody was, and that burnout was on the rise, and that mental ill health was becoming more of a problem. And of course, we hear that narrative around us all of the time. And it all sounded sort of pretty dismal. And so, you know, it gives us a burning platform, you know, it puts it on the agenda that we need to do something differently and that we need to improve the workplace. And we've known for a long time that we need to improve engagement in order to, you know, improve performance and productivity. But I was left thinking, we keep on talking about what's broken. But where's the evidence to show where people are getting it really right in the workplace? So when people feel really well, what's happening? And where they feel as if they're able to sort of sustain their energy and performance at work, what's going on? So I mean, the work I do anyway is around consciousness and conscious leadership and bringing a more conscious approach to the way that we run our organizations and our teams to create more human workplaces, which is why I love the Freedom to Be Human strapline that the Happiness Index coined. So I basically set up this project team with a group of like-minded people from companies like Oracle and BT and UCL and St John Ambulance, and talk to them about the idea that we could do a piece of research that looked at what great leaders are doing in organizations to make people feel good. And I mean, there was plenty of energy around this in terms of people wanting to find out. So we started some research. So we got a group of people who were happy to be interviewed. So we basically went out and said, you know, we want to find out what great leaders are doing in the workplace to make people feel good and to contribute positively towards well-being and inclusion and therefore performance. So if you've got a leader or if you've had a leader who has made a positive difference to your life, come and talk to us. So we interviewed about 40 people, and it was amazing because there was so much consistency in what these leaders were doing behaviorally on a day-to-day basis. And it's led to some really compelling findings and a really strong business case, I think, for leading in a conscious way. So yeah, that's where the project came from. And a year later, I mean, actually, I think the Mad World conference might have been, it was either in October or November of last year. Philip, you're nodding. So it's taken us this long to get from there to here, but I'm really pleased with the findings.
Amazing. That's a great backstory to lead up into. If you could just share a little bit about what did you discover from that research?
So, I mean, we discovered a lot, and I'll share it, you know, as we go through. But we found that paying attention to people as humans is a significant difference maker when it comes to the way people feel at work, and that relationships between line managers and people are central to the way that they feel and their well-being. So it was quite interesting because we talk about fruit yoga and that, you know, giving people fruit yoga and discounted health benefits isn't the way to solve well-being problems in organizations. Actually, at the heart of it is relationships and the way people feel as a consequence of the behavior that they experience around them. And actually, these relationships between the leaders that we heard about and the people that we interviewed was pretty intimate. And I don't mean intimate in a sort of intrusive way. I mean intimate in terms of the leaders really understood the people that they were leading. They understood their values, they understood what drove them, they understand what they were going through. They had very honest and open relationships based on trust. And it's been interesting for us to see. I mean, you know, for years I've been asked around, how do you get the balance right between having a personal relationship with people that you lead and sometimes having to make difficult conversations? And these people seem to navigate that. It didn't mean that they avoided difficult conversations. It almost created an environment where they could have them more easily because the relationships were based on trust and honesty. And actually, if there's a symbiotic relationship where both parties are being open and honest, then when things are difficult, they can be open and honest about that too. So just this very, very human approach to leadership, which, you know, of course, theoretically, I could have told you that was the answer. But actually, when we got into these very human stories, it was obviously the answer.
Did you expect for that to come out of the, I mean, what did you kind of expect to come out of the research when you first started? Were you kind of surprised by those findings?
I mean, we expected, we went in with, I don't even talk about them now because they've sort of fallen away in the background, but we went in with a set of characteristics that we expected conscious leaders to have. So in the interviews, we broke the interviews into two parts. So we would have an open interview with individuals just to say, tell us your story. I'm hearing a bit of feedback. Is that me?
Sorry.
Or is it?
Sorry, Marguerite, I'm just muting you. There's a bit of feedback, so it's strange. It's not muting.
Oh,
Margaret, would you mind muting your volume? It's getting a little bit of feedback in the.
I'll crack on whilst we're doing that.
Okay.
So I think we were expecting people to say that these leaders were pretty self-aware, that they supported development, that they were, you know, showed humility, that they were compassionate, all of the things I guess you would stereotypically consider to be a conscious approach to leadership. But what we didn't expect is some of the findings that we ended up seeing. So the most significant finding, so 95% of the interviews pointed to the extent to which people were seen. So that people actually felt as though that they were seen as individuals, that that these leaders really sort of understood who they were, paid attention to them, that they mattered to these leaders. And of course, that was created through an ongoing conversation and relationship building, and the time that they spent together, and the interest, I guess, that the leader paid to them. So that was quite a compelling finding. And actually, you know, all of the work we're doing around DE&I, trying to create more inclusive environments, it was almost like, okay, well, so if people just feel seen, if they feel as though they matter to the people that are leading them, actually, I think that that solves part of the inclusion problem, because it breaks down some of the barriers, I guess, that get in the way, and the sort of them and us situation that we often see between leaders, managers, and their people. So that was a really compelling finding. But the another finding that we came across, which also at 95% of the interviews, was that these leaders had their people's back and they advocated for them. So that when they had an idea, they stood up for it. They were willing, they had the courage to do that. They were willing to speak up on behalf of their team, but also they were willing to listen to the ideas of those around them, so they didn't feel as though they always had to have the answers. Which we also, the flip side to that is there was almost a vulnerability shown that these leaders were willing to abdicate some control to the people around them. And of course, often we say, you know, leaders don't have to have all of the answers. They don't have to be perfect. You know, it's really important to empower. And actually that was proven and demonstrated in this research, that they were sort of cheerleaders for their people, but not all that, you know, this wasn't sort of, you know, I will support you no matter what. When they didn't agree with the people, they'd also say that too. But there was plenty of space given for new ideas to be generated, and for them to then support those ideas and allow people the freedom and the space to create, I guess, new possibilities.
That's amazing. Those stats are really high too. 95% of those people that you interviewed had something in common. That's, I mean, you can't argue with that.
Yeah, well, most of the stats were high. So like the next thing that we found was around being present. In fact, I mean, we've all been on a journey as a research team too, because it's challenged our own leadership styles. One of the leaders in the team, we're all leaders actually in the team, well, mainly. And one of the research team was so taken aback by the finding of presence and the significance of it. And, you know, he said, sometimes I'll answer other emails when I'm on a Zoom call because, you know, I can. And actually, I've just realized that that's not okay, because I'm not really there. And I mean, that for him, that was just a big sort of discovery. But the extent to which these leaders were actually dependable and available and absolutely there with the individual when they needed them to be, was also something else that came out really, really strongly.
That's something I've learned throughout just some of the training I've done around mental health, is that being able to put your focus completely into the person that you're having a conversation with. You can notice if somebody else is sidetracked when you're not giving them your full attention, and that's so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, people do see it. Even on Zoom calls, they see it, don't they? Where there's a quick flick of the eye to something else. But also it's about this deep listening and listening with curiosity. So actually being incredibly interested in what the other person has to say, I think is something that really, really makes a difference to trust. And I think that if you believe, certainly this is what our research pointed to, if you believe that the person that's leading you or managing you actually, you know, is interested in you or cares about what you have to say, it's hugely compelling. And actually, one of the byproducts of this being seen, being advocated for, knowing that the person who's leading you actually cares about you, is this generation of energy. So, you know, we talk a lot about resilience and how to be resilient in teams. And what we saw was this leadership approach created resilience through trust and honesty and empowerment. And also people feeling that they were fully supported, and actually sort of created sustained energy, where lots of people said, you know, I've never worked harder than I worked in that job, but I was really happy. You know, we often talk about balance and burnout and not pushing yourself too hard. And actually, a lot of these people push themselves harder than they could ever have imagined, and it didn't seem to impact their well-being.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So that was really interesting. And the other thing was that these leaders didn't seem to be afraid to be challenged. So 92% of the interviews showed that they didn't feel as though they had to be right all of the time, or that their answers were necessarily right, and that they were up for being challenged. So, and I think that leads to the honesty and trust piece, where actually, you know, you as my manager can be honest with me, and I'm willing to take that, but as long as I can be honest with you too, otherwise it's not an equal relationship. And as a consequence, you know, these people seem to have incredibly challenging conversations with each other sometimes. And I can remember one of the interviewees saying, we didn't always get on, like we didn't always agree with each other, but we were able to have these very robust conversations with each other, knowing that there were going to be sort of no negative consequences to the conversation.
That links really well back to one of our first episodes of this season with Jenny Knighting from Nutcracker Agency, and she was talking about how she's created a thriving culture, and one of the things that she said was attributed to that was having open and honest conversations and being able to share and give feedback, but doing it in a constructive way, and being able to do that is just really important to creating that thriving culture. So
Yeah,
that's interesting that it just links in really well with that.
Well, the thing is, I think often managers or teams try to, you know, they say we need to be, you know, radical candor, we need to be very honest with each other, we need to be able to just speak up, but without the foundation of trust, then it's almost impossible, and you don't create those cultures. So unless there are deep relationships based on trust being created between management and the wider team, then it's not going to happen. You will not get people telling the truth. And you know, Marcus Buckingham and the Gallup research years ago said, you don't leave your company, you leave your manager. I mean, I don't agree with that fully, because I think that often organizationally there can be some problems that mean that your manager's sort of hamstrung and can't do what they need to do to support you. But actually this research does point to the fact that the manager-employee relationship is so central to everything. And actually, you know, engagement, productivity, sustained performance, well-being, a lot of it's predicated on the quality of that relationship.
That's really interesting. That leads nicely then, and you touched a lot on trust, and that's probably something that we should all take away as leaders. That's really important. What else can leaders learn from the research?
Well, so there was a hard side to it. So, you know, a lot of what I've just talked about was trust and honesty and having those good quality relationships. But 89% of people said that they felt really stretched by these leaders, and sometimes stretched to beyond where they were comfortable going, or sometimes the leaders would have conversations with them that didn't make them feel comfortable at the time. But actually on reflection, they can see that those were so necessary. So one person recounted a tale of where he was a store manager in quite a large retail store. And his regional manager came to him one day and basically had a conversation that said, you're not performing well enough in this job. And if you stay in it, you're going to become an underperformer, and we'll have to sort of manage that. And of course, I don't want that. You don't want it. I see huge amounts of potential in you. You're really good at these other things. So I would really, really like to find another role for you in the business that allows you to play to those strengths. And, you know, 15, 20 years later, he's now seen as a leading expert in that field. And he said at the time, the conversation was horrendous, like really, really difficult to take. But it actually totally changed his career. So, and somebody else we were talking to, who was a head of HR, who said that their leader helps them to be a better human. And she said they end up having very challenging conversations, which at one point they ended up having a conversation where she had to really tackle her own biases. towards other people, because she was really challenged by it, challenged on it by her manager. And she said that just made me a better person. So it's not all soft edge, it's about being stretched. And it's also in 73% of the interviews, so this was the least cited but still significant enough, was that these leaders and managers set clear direction. So they were very, very clear about the expectations, about the standards, about the objectives, about the direction. You know, they gave a clear idea of what was expected, so that people knew what they were actually striving towards. So I think, I mean, in terms of what this means for managers and leaders, I think that, I mean, certainly even myself as a leader, it makes you really consider your own style in relation to that. And in particular, so I would say I'm quite an empowering manager, but actually there's a flip side to that, which is if you don't give clear direction, actually, what are people trying to work towards? So getting that balance right. But also, I would have said up until now that I probably, if I saw people were struggling with a new area, I probably wouldn't push that hard. But actually, now that I've found, you know, out about the significance of being stretched, I'd probably lean into that a little bit more and explore it a bit more. The one thing that they said actually about being stretched was it's almost like they knew how far to go before they were like, okay, like we'll stop there. We won't go any further. Like, I know I might break you if we go beyond that point. But there was still, you know, it still seemed to be a lot of discomfort in these relationships. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Definitely putting yourself, I mean, I think we've all heard this before, that putting yourself out of your comfort zone is only going to help you grow a little bit. So that's really, really interesting, Natasha. So I just wanted to ask, what surprised you most about the findings from your research?
The biggest surprise by far was the impact that these leaders had on people's energy levels. And that almost sort of despite the crises or the challenges or the difficulties or the politics or whatever that was going on around these people, the relationship and the support and the trust that they had with their leaders and managers allowed them to sustain their energy. And whilst we're talking more and more around well-being and how to sustain performance and people taking care of themselves, I guess to understand the significance of those relationships with managers and leaders in that overall well-being and resilience piece, I think is sort of essential when it comes to organizations understanding how to build their well-being strategies and their people strategies more widely. So I think that's one thing. The second thing was the impact that these leaders had on the lives of people. I mean, there were so many stories. In fact, it seemed quite cathartic for a lot of the people that were sharing the stories. They were happy reliving the tales, and they felt really pleased that they had an opportunity to celebrate these leaders. And therefore, as a research team, doing the interviews was an absolute pleasure, because there was so much positivity created, I guess, as a consequence of having the conversations, but also people saying, you know, they just made a real difference to my life. They made a real difference to my career. And even a sort of at a very, you know, at a micro level, one of the interviewees talked about Timmy time. So her leader was called Timmy. And she said that she now, when she sees that her friends or people in her team are struggling, she thinks, right, you know, do they need some Timmy time? Because it's almost this sort of bolstering, you know, what can I do to support you, to help you get through the challenges? And I just thought that was really nice. She saw this manager as somebody who absolutely was there for her, but stretched her and challenged her to do more. And I guess the last surprise was the fact that the way that these people behaved seemed to create more conscious leaders. So through seeing what conscious leadership looked like, and through seeing people role modeling this very, very healthy way of behaving, it seemed to create more conscious leaders, because we asked the question, you know, has it affected or has it impacted the way you now lead people or deal with other people? And everybody said yes.
I think that's kind of linked to like the nature and nurture thing, where, you know, part of it is your surroundings, and then part of it is somebody in your life that's kind of helped facilitate growth and helped you understand how to be a conscious leader. That's really, really interesting. So my next question for you, Natasha, is what are 3 things that organizations can do to take on board those recommendations around what leaders can learn from the research?
Well, I mean, I think based on the recent developments in the working world, it's becoming so much more obvious that flexibility is key, and empowering people to sort of shape their roles in a way that allows them to do good work. So, you know, there's so much pushback around empowerment because you don't want to lose control of your team, you don't want to lose control of the way that people are working. But I think when you have these very individual relationships between managers and employees, having very personal conversations around what would work for you in order to help you to do the best possible job, and then, you know, allowing them to continue to work in a flexible way once we start going back, you know, to once we're not working the way we are now, which is still quite limited, but also allowing people to job craft, so to work to their strengths, to focus on work that that energizes them, that empowers them, that makes them happy, but also making sure there's as much opportunity for employee voice as possible. And I would always say that happens on 3 levels. So at a very individual level between a manager and an employee, at a team level, so you get the team discussing ideas, and then at an organizational level where people in the organization have an opportunity to speak up about the wider organizational ways of working and to express an opinion around that. So I think empowerment probably is the first thing. And I mean, that can mean significant culture change in some situations or slight tweaks in others. You know, you should be recruiting for these skills. So recruiting for people who have a conscious approach. And we looked at leaders, but of course leadership capability can be seen in all levels of the organization. And so, you know, we've created a competency framework around this. I tend to avoid them, competency frameworks, like the plague, but I have nightmares about them. But it sort of it lent itself to creating a set of competencies that are conscious leadership competencies. I can share. We're producing a report that's being published on the 11th of December, which has got everything in it, so you'll receive it. But I can share some of them with you today. So recruit for those skills, you know, actually embed that into your recruitment process, and then promote for those skills. So, you know, some of the skills, the competencies are curiosity, compassion. I mean, that's no surprise. But resilience, so, you know, self-care as a leader, the ability and the wherewithal to understand that unless you are able to manage yourself and unless you are taking care of yourself, actually, you don't create a strong foundation for your team. You're not able to be present for them because you're distracted. You're not able to be compassionate and curious because you're maybe threatened or, you know, not in the right frame of mind yourself. So it's so significant, you know, leaders taking care of themselves as well as the people around them in order to be a conscious leader. But other things like, you know, being clear and advocating and getting personal, but through a lens of leadership and what that looks like. I think those things you can actually, you know, look for in people and develop in people. This is all emotional intelligence. You know, we know that emotional intelligence is a developable skill. So this is, you know, people will have it, you know, intrinsically within their character, and you can develop people too.
It's really interesting what you said about like being aware of yourself as a leader too, and focusing on yourself, making sure that you can also, and then in turn, take care of other people. Because if you're not feeling safe and you're feeling that you're a bit in that fight or flight mode, then you can't use that energy positively to help others as well in turn. So That's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we all do that, don't we? We're exhausted, and then we don't ask somebody else how they're doing, or we're feeling threatened at work for some reason. And so we're thinking more about trying to sustain our energy in a crisis rather than looking at what other people are going through. So I think unless you recognize that behavior in yourself, unless you recognize what triggers you, unless you actually take care of yourself, there's a possibility that you won't show up in a grounded, calm, rational way that then allows you to be conscious, compassionate for other people. So learning about yourself as a leader is incredibly important.
Definitely. So my next question for you, Natasha, is with dispersed teams and remote working, what would this research mean for management and leadership development right now, especially in the world that we're in, working remotely?
So, I mean, because relationships are central, it's about focusing on how to build those. I mean, it's not just a case of saying to your managers, build better relationships with your people. I mean, it requires a sort of deeper level of conversation than that. So, you know, some leadership management development that allows people to have some really robust conversations around what that looks like, and how to make sure that you are getting close to people, but you know the boundaries, you know what not to do, I guess. But also creating as many opportunities for people to speak up as possible. So, and sometimes this can be hard, I think, for managers and leaders. One, structurally, it's not in the system to do that. You know, you don't have tools, pulse surveys, or, you know, the sorts of surveys that you guys do, the happiness index. You don't have those in place to allow people to be able to express an opinion. So using those sorts of tools, I think, is incredibly important, and not just once a year. You know, you have to be more agile about this. But also creating space in team meetings to have open conversations so that it's not always about delivery. And I think that we have definitely seen that in the last few months, that managers have had to pivot to, because there's no water cooler moments for many, many teams. How do you create those opportunities to have open conversation and check in with how people are doing without that organic stuff that happens in an office environment when everybody's in? But also giving people clear direction. I mean, I'm a big fan of OKRs and objective setting rather than sort of task management. So being very clear about the outcomes of people's work rather than needing to feed them work on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. That's very enabling. And it also means that, so with OKRs, for instance, where you've got, you know, objectives and key results, if you're very clear up front around what a positive outcome or what a good outcome would look like between you as a manager and employee, then it gives people a roadmap to get to where they need to be, but it doesn't necessarily tell them how to do it. And then being available. And I think that can be really hard for managers and leaders to be available in this world of, you know, distraction and overload, but actually paying attention to that and asking yourself the question, am I available enough to the people around me? And, you know, maybe having that conversation with them can help you to pay more attention to people. So, I mean, you know, and I could repeat all of the things that I've already said around the way that you show up as a leader. But I think that even having the conversation in your organization around how conscious we are as a management team, I think can start a really good quality new conversation that hasn't been had before.
That's really interesting. I'm really looking forward to having a chance to read the report as well. That's coming out on the 11th. So what is next for Project Brightspots?
So the one thing that we were left wondering at the end of all of this was what motivates leaders to be conscious in their approach. You know, is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it because they've had, sorry, my neighbour's waving at me through the window. That's not distracting.
Feel free to wave.
Well, she's gone now. Now I feel as if I just ghosted her. I'll have to deal with that afterwards. So yeah, back to it. Oh yeah, leaders. That's right. Yeah. So why do they do that? Like, what drives them? That's something we really want to figure out. So we want to go back to some of the leaders that were spoken about and say, like, why do you do that? To try and figure out whether it's something that's, you know, just in them, and we're going to make an assumption that it's a combination of something that's in them and experience that's led them to where they are. So we're going to do the next stage of research where we're going to go out and speak to those leaders. But the other thing that we want to try and answer as part of that is, do you have to be a conscious follower to get the best out of a conscious leader? And by way of an example, if you've got a conscious leader who's trying to stretch you and trying to have an honest conversation with you, but you feel defended and insecure, actually, will that not work? Do you have to have a level of growth mindset, I guess, and the ability to hear feedback, and also the inner belief that you can be stretched in order to work in that symbiotic way with conscious leaders? So they're the questions we're left with.
And is this something that you'll be working on in the next year? Or are you going to be taking a bit of time in between?
I mean, it's so, honestly, if for anybody who hasn't done a research project like this, so hugely rewarding. We've loved it, but yeah, definitely taking Christmas off, and then we'll go again.
That's really exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it in the next coming year. I just want to open the floor now if anybody wanted to ask any questions for Natasha about her research, or if you had anything that you thought was really interesting, feel free to shout out.
I think we might have one of the project team on the call as well. Ali, are you out there?
Do we?
I don't know, she might have gone. She might have got bored and decided she's heard enough about Project Brightspot for now.
No, I'm here. Although that's the absolute worst time you could have asked me, because I think the dog's just about to bark.
Ali, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you did, Tash. Hold on 1 second.
Neighbours, dogs.
Literally the worst time. No, you didn't miss anything, Tash. I think the only, if I could emphasize any of the points that you made, it's absolutely the one about energy. It has become so clear to us that people who lead in this way create other people who lead in this way. They create the environment for everybody around them to thrive. And that is truly, like, if we all did that, that would fundamentally change the workplace. So we basically would love it if everybody became a leader like the ones that we spoke to in Brightspot, because the potential is kind of exponential.
I have a question about that too. I mean, this is probably going into your next research, but do you think that's something that is really difficult to get to that point of being a conscious leader, or is it something probably it takes time? And I get a bit with nature and nurture, isn't it?
Yeah, almost certainly. Like, when you guys read the research next week, you'll see that we've tried so hard throughout to give really practical tips and guidance on what people could just do tomorrow to even take steps to becoming this kind of a leader. So it's completely accessible. Like, there's things that you could just do straight away. Clearly, some people have more of a natural aptitude for it than others, but it's completely attainable, I think, for, I'll say, almost anyone. I think you'll always come up against resistance to change, but if anyone wants to become a leader like this, it's completely possible, and handily we've kind of written you the guide on how to do it.
But I think also that some of us, or all of us in the room, will already be doing some of this stuff. It doesn't necessarily need to be seismic shifts. And I mean, if I look at the role, my when I was an HR director, and how I showed up as a leader, I was inconsistent. So I can now see that I really saw some people and I didn't see others. And now I check in with myself and think, why was that? So, and as with anything conscious, there's so much subconscious behavior that goes on, so many subconscious drivers and beliefs. So by bringing this to the surface for people, it helps them to make sense of it a bit more. So that, that was one thing. It wasn't because I didn't like the other people. It's just because by the very nature of the way our work It's project based, or that, in terms of structures, you'll spend more time with certain members of your team than you will with others. But actually, by paying attention to that and recognizing that it's probably not okay to leave people out, that actually, how do I now make sure that everybody in my team is seen, and also that we build a relationship with each other? So that's one example. But also, I think that, before I did this work, before I burnt out and I went on this very difficult journey, I guess, of self-improvement and self-development over the last 3 years, I would say that I wouldn't have wanted so much to show my own fallibility in the past. I would have felt, because I was a leader, that I should have had the answers, and actually going out to the team going, guys, I don't really know what we should do here, or actually, can somebody else lead on this? I don't think I would have done that consistently. It would have depended on what I was working on, and therefore I created a bottleneck. I held on to things. I then held relationships in the business that nobody else had. Now on reflection, I can see I could have done that so differently. So I think some of this is about using this as a mirror to look at your own leadership style and checking in and deciding whether what you're doing works, whether it is inclusive, whether it is supporting well-being. And if it's not fully, or if it's inconsistent, you've got some choice now. You can do something about it.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really interesting, Natasha. Thanks for sharing that too. We just had a question from Helen Farmer about how does inclusion and diversity show up in your research and leaders so far?
So these leaders are just inherently inclusive. Because they actually pay attention. So I think that ultimately, what is inclusion? It's about making people feel as though they belong, that they aren't excluded. And so inherently, by the very nature of conscious leadership and paying attention to people and supporting them, seeing them, it's an inclusive style of leadership. But I think it requires some people to break down some of their own barriers. Often we're threatened by diversity, we're threatened by differences of opinions. We feel that people shouldn't necessarily challenge our opinion as a leader, but that's not inclusive. So I think some people would have to dig deep and figure out why they felt threatened by a counter view, and allow a bit more of that difference of opinion to be acceptable in their teams in order to be more inclusive. But I ultimately think that this approach to leadership is inclusive, even if it's, you're inconsistent as a leader. It gives you the opportunity to decide what you're going to do differently, to spread that sort of inclusive approach to more people.
Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, here's another one from Helen. Did you want to ask that question? You'd like to come on the, not sure if you're able to talk at the moment. Oh, there we go.
Hi. Yeah, just with the leaders that you researched, were they representative of the population? Because I'm just interested in, the experience of, so how representative was that sample as well?
Yeah, so
to see if that varies, because they're, the different versions of conscious leadership experience and journeys that they could have had.
Yeah, we looked at that. I think we probably made an assumption, well, I did, made an assumption that the more experienced leaders would have worked out how to do this, and that wasn't the case, actually. In fact, there was one interview where somebody talked about a leader that was younger than them, that was in their 20s, who was the most conscious and best leader that they'd ever had. So that was interesting. But they came from all different backgrounds, different nationalities, and a split of men and women. In fact, there was a total, it was 50-50 in terms of the people that we interviewed across the genders, or specifically who were men or women. But I think that, it was a fairly diverse group. I'd wanted to be more diverse, to be honest. It would have been good if we'd gotten a more diverse group, but of course we got who we got when we went out to our networks. But it was diverse. So I think that we tried to see if there was anything interesting to note based on the demographic information, but there wasn't really.
Okay. Well, thank you, Natasha. I am conscious of time. We've got 3 minutes left of the hour. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining on the call today, Natasha, and sharing all of your research. When your research does come out on the 11th, where would we be able to find or get a hold of our own copy of, so we can read through it?
So either email me and I'll drop you a copy when it comes out, or you can go on our website and you can download it. I mean, I say that I think you will be able to, on the 11th of December, be able to download the report without putting any details in. It should just be there for you. So yeah, either ask me so I remember, or you remember.
Sounds good. If it's okay with you, I'll include you in our weekly roundup, our bi-weekly newsletter, so people can get a hold of you to get access to that.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining today, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. Thanks again, Natasha, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.